ready for our next talk today. So we'll begin from second speaker. So I'm going to first briefly introduce our second speaker, Dr. Kenny Sick, who is the Edward and Elizabeth Goodman Rosenberg Professor and Chairperson of the Department of Communication at University of Delaware. She's a health communication researcher who spent 15 years at MSU as a professor of communication, graduate director of MA program in health and risk communication, and various associated roles in the College of Communication. Dr. Silk also collaborated with both Chuck Atkin and Sandy Smith on the breast cancer and environment research program, providing a transdisciplinary research experience for graduate students for almost 20 years. So Dr. Silk will today talk about BCERP communication research and its trajectory over that time frame today. So please welcome Dr. Silk today.
So it's good to be back. It really is. Yeah, it is. It's good to be back, John Cherry. So I'm excited to be here, and I'm that little clicker dude. Here it is, right in front of me. And I'm going to talk about BSERP, and I'm going to talk about Chuck, and I'm going to talk a little bit about Sandy. But it's integrated Sandy. So I did a little homework, a little research, reached out to people who have worked on the BSERP grant to get some memories, as well as some heartfelt remarks about Sandy. So we're gonna kind of weave all of those things together, talk a little bit about research, and certainly talk broadly about BSERP, and then talk about what I think the BSERP is as, kind of a good contribution to team science as a model for training students. So with that in mind, we're gonna accomplish all that. And as we do, we acknowledge those who have funded us. And so here's the list over the about 20 years where we had different funding sources from the National Institutes of Health, particularly through NCI and the National Institute for Environmental Health Sciences. So just to go back, started a long time ago in an elevator in New Orleans, and I was just finishing my PhD work from the University of Georgia, but I was at Penn State. I had applied to a job. I'm at NCA, I get into an elevator, and this lovely couple walks in, and I'm doing the whole name tag reading thing, and I'm like, oh my God, these are the people from MSU. Maybe I should introduce myself. And before I had to, Sandy did. She was like, oh! And they shuffled me out with them up to have drinks up in some penthouse area. And then at the party, they were just wonderful. So that was my first impression. These MSU people aren't so bad. That was my first impression. So here's Chuck. We saw this picture earlier, and I found it online. And I found it why I liked it a lot, because what it has here is the breast cancer website picture. This is one of the earliest pieces from the BSERP doing a content analysis. And so this was probably at one of the BSERP conferences. It just felt like every other month we were going to an integration meeting, or we were going to the annual conference, or we were at NCA or ICA. It felt like we were always presenting BSERP work. So this is one of the earliest pieces that we did, and we'll talk a little bit more about that trajectory a bit more too. So got some goals today, said them a little bit, but using BSERP as an exemplar for doing team science, and then also providing evidence and anecdotes from the program. And notice it's small, notice it's italicized, squeeze it in a little bit of Sandy stuff, just to kind of celebrate the legacy that she really does bring to MSU. So, some numbers. Things haven't changed too much with breast cancer. We do know early detection, is a good thing and is working out. And I feel like I should have probably, I feel like I want to change my microphone. Can I do that up in the back? I might do it because I want to move. You can't hear me. I'm gonna keep doing it. But I want to take a look here at these numbers and say to you, look, 15% of all cancers are breast cancer diagnosis in any given year. It's okay? Great. So we've got 300,000, we've got this many deaths, and the incidence rates and the death rates, all these things, we see females are disproportionately impacted. So breast cancer remains a pretty significant health problem, public health issue, an opportunity to somehow reduce risk. And I'm not gonna use the word prevention. Prevention means there's maybe something we can do about it all the time. And there's probably some things we can do about it to help reduce risk. But when we use the word prevention, it puts the onus on the individual. It makes it seem like they haven't done something should they get breast cancer. So the typical term is around using risk reduction. That's the more appropriate term for it. So, we'll start with a quote. So, I'm gonna try to integrate here and follow. So, Jessica Russell was one of Sandy's students. And when I reached out, this is what she shared. Sandy's mentoring and impact on my career started before we met. She was an undergraduate with Lisa Lindsay and chemo. They brought me on board as part of their research team, and they shared, if I was lucky, I'd get into MSU. So I stepped foot on the campus in the world of Sandy and began to experience the mentoring that she provided, including go get a winter coat kind of thing after laughing at her about her California clothing. That actually came up a few times with students, that Sandy would recommend getting, you're in Michigan, you might need a coat, kind of thing. Her mentoring went far beyond preparing for Michigan winners. She evolved into a second mom, better a chosen mom. She was relentless in her pursuits and stopped at nothing to open doors for opportunities for me to be a part of. Now, her standards and perspective gave me the ability to go up early for tenure and really help set me up for my career. I have a lot of these quotes that I'm gonna share with Sandy afterward, but there's lots. Now I'm just grateful to meet and talk about more life happenings and not breast cancer or proposals. So this was the part that I thought was great, that kind of launches us nicely. She was on 2 projects, but what she said, she got excited because Sandy talked about it in a way that made her excited. And that kind of enthusiasm is so important, right? To motivate students, to get them engaged. And what isn't glam about rats and tumors, right? So this is what the BSERP was about. It was not just about communication science, it was about sort of this larger grand challenge issue of how do we really address breast cancer, and it's gonna take more than one discipline to do that, and that's considered more of a transdisciplinary model. So we're gonna start with video. Well, not start, but this is a video that sets up the talk really nicely.
Do you have to take your cursor over here?
Maybe I do.
I don't think we need to see that, Cammy. Thank
Oh,
you.
I
We're good.
I feel really good about this video. I feel like Sandy does a really good job of setting up the BSERP and what's going on. So, I'm sorry. I should have had it prepared better. There it is. Sorry. It's 2 minutes, and it's good. And Sandy did a wonderful job of setting up the BSERP and showing our research team and talking about shock. It kind of pulls my whole talk together.
PBS, so you're sort of stuck in.
How many of you have seen this video? Only a few, so it's good.
I've been at Michigan State since 1990. I love working in the Department of Communication, and that's probably why I've never left. Show me where you've written about the field. Our department is well known in the field of communication for our focus on research teams. Welcome everybody to our research team meeting today. Michigan State just ranked #2 in the world in the Shanghai World Rankings. We're going to talk about the Training the Pediatric Healthcare Worker Grant. I'm really passionate about studying communication because it's so inherently interesting to understand how people produce messages, interpret them, and how they exchange them, and what impacts that has on people's lives. So we've done all the focus groups with the caregivers. I teach classes in communication theory and interpersonal communication. One of the research teams I work on is focusing on how to train pediatric healthcare workers.
Nobody really knew about risk factors, and therefore they didn't discuss it with caregivers.
It's called breast cancer in the environment, and we've discovered that young girls are particularly vulnerable to environmental risks that could later result in breast cancer, so it's an important time to intercede. Once you explained it to them, then all of a sudden then it became important,
Definitely.
right? Working with students in general, but graduate students in particular, because we get to be in smaller groups, it's almost really like having a family. We've made a lot of progress, especially because this grant lasts for several years and we're ahead of the game here. I think my legacy here is going to be in the students that I've taught and the careers that they've gone on to have. Working at Michigan State has not only had a professional impact on me, but it's definitely been personal as well, because I was able to meet my husband, Chuck Atkin, sadly passed away 5 years ago. He was a very, very well-respected professor here, and then for the last 15 years of his life, he was the chair of the communication department. We started dating one another. Then I went to a faculty meeting one day, and my husband made a motion that I should marry him, and it was seconded, and all my colleagues voted unanimously that I should marry him. Chuck was in the Department of Communication from the time he was 25, but he had a longer history in East Lansing. In 1998, Chuck received the University Distinguished Professorship, and I wanted to give him something special, so I bought him this gift. This award means so much to me because it's honoring my career and my research, but even more than that, because I can share it with my husband and feel like his spirit is here as I receive the award.
So, I think you can sort of see why it sets it up. And she gave him, if you didn't see it, a sweatshirt with a zip code on it. 8823 that Monique was talking about. So it's kind of perfect. So what Sandy talked about was how we were working on a pediatric grant that was to train healthcare providers. And she sort of, the pieces of that really introduced nicely the fact that we had done formative research to show that if you give them a little bit of a hook, they get excited about it, but they really didn't understand what it was about. And so once they explained just a little bit, then we kind of had their attention. We also had done, and I'll show this with some of her research, with her memorable message framework, that when people remembered and were more willing to act on information from a healthcare provider. So all of these things were indicating that if we could get to these physicians and get them this information, perhaps they would actually share that information in an interaction and with a patient, and that would be helpful. So here are some of the big key definitions. I'll just go through those briefly, but here are the things we kind of wrote a lot about during the time that weren't particularly communication focused. We transdisciplinary refers to involving lots of different disciplines in solving an issue that can't be solved by just one discipline. So we worked with epidemiologists, we worked with biologists, we worked with breast cancer advocates, we worked with students a whole lot. I'll share some of those names in a little bit. We also worked with the idea of the precautionary principle. If we left it to the biologists, we would have shared absolutely nothing anytime soon with the BSERP. They think we need one more study before we can actually share information that might help people reduce their risk. And this was actually a real tension of when to share evolving and emerging findings. When I was here 4 years ago with the Bedding House, I talked a little bit more about that. But this was a real tension, and so we really led with, we're doing this, we're gonna share and communicate using this precautionary principle because it's in the benefit of the public to know this information now. Windows of susceptibility. This is this idea that during someone's lifetime, there are different windows where you're more susceptible to environmental disruptors called endocrine disruptors, which can increase your breast cancer risk a little bit more than had you not been in that particular developmental period. And there are 7 of those across lifespan. We focused very, kind of heavily ourselves on puberty and pre-puberty with young kids. But other folks over the years, they extended it to these other windows of susceptibility at other sites. So if you weren't familiar with the BSERP, I'm making some assumptions that some of you are, there were many centers initially across the country doing different types of epidemiological studies, biology studies, as well as communication studies too. But we were really the sort of the epicenter for the communication research here at MSU. So it was a big enterprise. It was a pioneering enterprise at the time. where they hadn't really funded something quite like this with a real focus on the transdisciplinary piece and the communication science piece to it. And one of the unusual things they did was funded for 7 years initially. Generally, grants are funded for 5 years. But 7 years, understanding that there was some formative years. And if you're familiar with Tuckman's model, the norming, storming, forming, and all that, we did a lot of storming in the breast cancer project. So endocrine disruptors, these are chemicals in the environment that are kind of everywhere, that can mimic hormones. And so they're in toys, they're in plastics of all type, they're in frying pans, they're in carpets. And it behooves us to read labels, one of our big recommended behaviors, to help reduce those exposures. And if you think about where we were with the research that we were doing, if you think about translational research, there's sort of the mechanistic research at time one that happens in labs. There's a sense that at translation at the second level that we're trying to get that information into health decision makers' hands and to the public. And then ideally, you have the lab and public health kind of working together too. But I would say we were pretty squarely situated within the translational T2 timeframe of doing our research. So this is a lot, but it kind of talks a lot about the first decade of the research and where it went. This was presented at, I think it was the 2003 breast cancer conference in out in San Diego, I think. But I think that it kind of shows a nice trajectory, a busy trajectory, mind you, of doing formative research with focus groups and interviews and content analyses were the next, leading to that, where we really found out that prevention, risk reduction wasn't very well represented. Lots of treatments, hormone replacement therapy, those are the kinds of things we saw mostly in the media and on websites. Chuck led the content analysis work, and then Sandy really led the memorable message work that I'll talk just a little bit about too in a minute. And then we started taking a look at websites some more, and then did some work with breast cancer activism. We were always working with advocates, and there was a piece that came out about sort of really taking a look at the history of breast cancer. For me, I had never actually worked on that kind of a chapter, I guess. But it was published in, I think, a Women's Health Journal. But what was interesting was it was a bunch of the biologists and epidemiologists who were trying to write it, and they kept getting rejected for it. So they brought it back to us and said, hey, can you give us a hand? And I helped out to do all of the R&R stuff and worked with them on that. So it's interesting the skill sets that people bring to the table as part of a transdisciplinary model. This was not in their wheelhouse. Then we have this study, which is always one of my favorites because it showed that if using videos are actually lead to more actual engagement in behavior than a static image on a website. And I thought that we did a time to follow up about a month later and found that the people who actually saw the video on the website with recommendations actually engaged in more behavior. And then we started lots of different experiments in 2013, and from then we moved into doing a lot more interventions with educational things for the healthcare providers, and then also for some data for a kid project that we were working on too. So I thought this kind of captured a lot of things at the time, and everything I would say has probably doubled since this time, but it was a nice, kind of like, I don't know how one loses the clicker. One did lose the clicker. I'll find it here.
Take it with the air down.
Maybe he did. No, he did not. It's me, but he's coming back. I got it. So, here we go. Or here we not go. So,
Maybe it is the end of the air. Maybe it's rescuing them.
here we go. So Sandy engaged in the memorable message research. this was my first actually knowing anything about it. I didn't actually work on this part of the research. And she found some really interesting things that were really helpful for moving forward with the training. And you know, the big findings were, people do remember, whether you've had a friend or not, with breast cancer. A lot of people do remember, have a memorable message about breast cancer. Other key things, I just want to make sure I'm getting it right. 4 categories of topics emerged: early detection, awareness, treatment, and prevention. And sources: media, friends, family, medical professionals. These are all things that might make sense, but she empirically showed that indeed these were the sources. And that memorable messages originating from medical professionals were substantially more likely to motivate detection behaviors than prevention behaviors. So that's a pretty important thing to know. People listen to their healthcare providers, and we kind of know that, but when we start getting a preponderance of evidence, it makes good sense. And there's a whole lot more to this work in terms of the Speech Act piece and the kinds of things that they remembered in terms of Speech Acts too. There were directives, and so there's a whole bunch here. I'm doing the quick swath of it. So I want to talk a little bit about the pediatric healthcare provider training. When I was here last time, I think this is where I left off. I talked about a lot of the other research, and now I think we've got a little bit more findings that we published with this one, and then just a little bit of data from kind of a defunct study because of the pandemic. It was just really hard to get into schools during the pandemic, as you might imagine. So anyhow, we've got these 2 pieces that really showcase our pediatric healthcare provider training that we created, and there's some good stuff here. So I've got a quote from Brandon Walling, who was the lead on this particular one. So it's just Sandy in general. I don't want to say too much of this because I keep getting like an evil eye from Sandy, so I don't want to. I don't. But I want her to know that he felt extremely motivated by you, and you took him under his wing, or you took him under your wing, and really at DCHC really showed him around, and he met Gary Krebs, and what he remembered too was that when he first met you, it was in, I guess, Steve McCornack was in the room. I don't know if you were in Steve's class or doing a research talk, but he said Sandy sat in front of the room waiting patiently for people to answer a question she had asked. And he says, I came to know that look pretty well throughout the next 7 years. But that was the first time I'd ever seen that look on her face. I eventually realized she wasn't going to continue until somebody answered her question. And that's tenacity, and that's the tenacity I know from working with Sandy on this research too. And he doesn't remember the content of what he said, but then he started to talk about her bringing him to DCHC, walks him around, meets Gary Krebs. Fast forward 7 years, which I think, I don't know if it was last year or the year before, sees Gary Krebs, who says, hey, what are you doing? Meets some people from Lighter, which is where he currently works. So then he ends with, so maybe it just comes back to that look on her face, the wheels in motion behind that look in her head. She has these plans, makes connections for people, has her special way of influencing them and pointing people in the right direction for their full potential. I don't know where I'd be without her. So it felt right to kind of put Brandon in there because he's the one who led our research, our write-up of this research here too. So looking at the pediatric healthcare provider, I want to say we applied for an R21, which is a smaller grant, to take what we knew from years of working on the BSERP and saying, okay, we need to reach these pediatric healthcare providers. How do we do that? How do we do that? Well, they're all required to do continuing medical education, so you kind of have a captive audience if you can get them to your training. We did try out the training at a live conference and had not only a handful of people show up, but the people who showed up were really enthused about this and thought it was a little bit different than the other things that they had gone to in the past. So we got this fund, we did the formative research that we've been doing for years, we developed the training using a scientific advisory board. There's no way they would have let us actually have the grant if we didn't have a scientific advisory board of people from the BSERP on it who were not communication scientists, but who can ensure the accuracy of the science we were going to be communicating. Fine. WKR, shout out, big partners in this one for sure, helped us out. And then the script writing. Madeline Mulroy was our lead scriptwriter. She was fantastic, and we really went through a lot, because to get a script, I am not a Hollywood person by any stretch. I had no interest in writing scripts, but we realized pretty early on it was literally gonna have to be these pages and pages and pages of scripts, and it was just so much work that I had no idea what we were getting ourselves into. But I shout out to her for that too. So, pretty simple. I've been interested in diffusion of innovation over the last few years, had a lot of failed experiments around diffusion of innovation. But this particular project was sort of informed with this idea that if we could make these videos engaging, if we could make them somehow compatible, if we could sort of leverage some of the constructs from the diffusion of innovation, maybe that improves these videos. Maybe it's helpful to them to see that these are a little different than other videos. This was not there's no control group with this. However, we did do a time series where we did a pre-test, a post-test right after the training, and then 3 to 4 weeks later we did another post-test to see if they retained anything and if they actually did anything yet with the information in their actual practices. So we had 3 modules. This might look a little familiar. And I want to say this project in some ways really integrated teaching as well as research, as well as outreach. It was sort of a sweet spot because the one thing when I was here and I was a Lilly Fellow, learning about how to write objectives and align them appropriately and to think about how to engage, this is sort of really kind of fits with this too. So I really enjoyed the idea that we were bringing all the pieces of our work as academics into a particular project. So overview of BSERP, cautionary principle, and preview. Also our idea was that you might not do all 3 modules, so we want to scaffold the learning a little bit so you get a little piece of each of the modules, even if you only do one. So we did an overview of the BSERP cautionary principle and then a preview of the next 2. So you got some real basic knowledge. That was like the basic module. And then the second one was the more, I guess, sciencey one in terms of summarizing the first module, a little bit about the BSERP, what it was doing, and then really talking about windows of susceptibility, endocrine disruptors, and lifestyle factors. And then we did a little preview of the third one, which was a summary of the first 2, and then really focused on how do you integrate this into your practice. Modeling, we had actors, we went over to the med school, tape things, that was the whole thing. And this is where we know that the interpersonal piece was really important, and I remember Sandy really taking a strong hand in helping us understand what might be the most, the concepts from interpersonal comm that we should be really thinking about in terms of translating this into the training. Our evaluation design, pre-post and 3 to 4 week post-test, we had 100 practitioners. We only actually tested module 2 and 3, and we partnered with the Michigan State Medical Society to get it offered as a continuing medical education unit. In my conversation with Brandon Walling, we talked about, what was it? There was something. We were sort of texting back and forth about that place. I was like, oh yeah, we didn't know how they got work done. Every time we went there, it was sort of a hot mess. Nobody really did anything. So, this is being live streamed. I'm sorry. That's not good. It's the old truth star up here, right? Anyhow, but they were gracious enough to help us out at some point, and we got this officially able to give CME credits to practitioners. So this is just some simple data, and that's pretty much what we could get from doing some essentially post-test stuff. And what we did find is with the first module with the windows of susceptibility and endocrine disruptors, that indeed sometimes we don't find the intention behavior link. But sometimes we don't, but we did here, and that's something. And it follows the model we had anticipated, and that makes us happy. And that's good, and you sort of see that there's some decent, correlations there. And then in the second model, we sort of see a little bit more, but we do see also the connection with attitude and behavior too, which is kind of a nice thing as well. So these are not sophisticated statistics by any stretch. And there was this partial support for that initial model that if we can give them some information and change their attitudes, maybe their intentions will be impacted and they'll actually engage in trying to share some information with parents, right? So there's a little bit of good evidence here. And still, and I think I at least showed some data last time that was similar to this. This might be the final data here. Is, you want to always ask, do you like the training? Is it helpful to you? That type. We had really great qualitative comments about how they were already using it in their practice, how they plan to use it in their practice, how this was a great training. So we got really nice qualitative feedback and also some quantitative stuff about being helpful, relevant, useful, all those things. And then we also see, and this isn't like shockingly wonderful, right? But what we do see at time 3, when we actually measured behavior, is that it was sustained. What we see, right, is a falling off of effects over time. And when you can get somebody to remember something for more than 5 minutes, you feel pretty good about it. And that's sort of the goal here, right? Is to get these docs to engage and actually report that they are intending to do things. And they actually remember. They have to remember it to do it. They do. So anyway, I was pretty happy to see that from time 2 to time 3, we actually retained the knowledge. So the good news is, I took a look yesterday. I'm like, can people still take this training? Does this still live on? I don't know if it does or not. So I found out that indeed it does. And if you go to bserp.org, you can actually go and read through and click there and actually sign up and take this to get training. In terms of legacy, boom, right? Like it. Really excited about that, right? So I think when we think about our research, it's easy. I always still get excited about a publication, but I get excited about impact too, right? And significance. And I think that this really kind of illustrates for me, that was a lot of work. We created something big. It was published. We graduate students got lots of great training, and it still lives on with people actually taking it. Now I gotta find out who's actually taking it, and I have some data on that to see if anybody's actually still doing it. But this led to another project that I started to do, I think just before I left MSU, where we created videos about each of the different areas of the window susceptibility, endocrine disruptors, and the precautionary principle. And these were designed with WKAR to really engage kids and be used as part of a curriculum to get them thinking about reducing exposures at an early age. Not sure if I want to brave showing one. I feel like I might have before, but maybe I'll try. See what happens. He's already ready to help me. God bless him. All right, here we go. Whatever you did before. I can't see it here, so I'm having a hard time. All right. You might just want to stay here. This is just one of them.
Hi, I'm Amelia, and I'm at Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. Today, I'm talking with Desiree Walker, a health educator and advocate with BSERP. Ms. Walker, what do BSERP researchers and health advocates like you do?
BSERP is Breast Cancer and the Environment Research Program. BSERP researchers and health advocates like myself, we basically are looking to understand the environment and what impact chemicals can have in terms of breast cancer risk. Makeup, so lipstick, eyeshadow, soap, everyday products. There are chemicals that are called endocrine disruptors, and with your skin, in terms of absorption, these are ways that things can get into your body, increasing your risk. We all use sunscreen, it has parabens, but we never really think about looking at the ingredients.
What is the precautionary principle?
The precautionary principle simply encourages you to have the concept better safe than sorry. So although we may not know all the chemicals and its impact on breast cancer, we think that if you feel something could be harmful, it's better to avoid it to keep your risk low.
Why is the precautionary principle important for young girls like me?
At this stage of your life, your body is going through changes. Your breast tissue is developing and your risk starts to increase based on the exposures you have to toxins. So it's important for you to have conversation with your family in terms of your household products. Start reading labels to know what's in the products. There are other options out there that don't have chemicals that will actually give you the same results. And generally, it's not difficult with the internet to find alternatives. If you don't like them, try some other things. But I think it's a really great exercise in practice to avoid chemicals, even though we don't have the links and can definitively say that is what is causing the cancer. You actually doing the research to try and bring about change, not only for yourself, but for your family, you'll feel good about it. And you'll find that it will have other benefits for your health. And so keeping in mind the precautionary principle would be helpful, because your actions today will have an impact on your future.
When it comes to preventing breast cancer, I learned following the precautionary principle at my age can make a difference in the future. What did you learn?
So I just want to say that this was experimental design, and you'll see that we had a control message. Thank you so much. I think it's my last video. So I think I'll go. But we have a setup here where we've got 3 conditions that are experimental conditions with integrating diffusion of innovation manipulations. And how do we do that? We asked these folks in the interview to add certain things in, and some of them were not willing, to be clear. Some of them had concerns about the things that we were, so we said, please do your best. So this is the challenge of working across disciplines. What we were asking them to say was not like, we've solved cancer. We didn't ask them those types of things. But some people did not. So I wonder at the strength of some of the manipulations, because I think some of the videos actually lacked some of the content that we would like to have had in there. So with that in mind, we had these videos. This is the beginning of the pandemic now, and we're trying to get into schools. It didn't really work out. I'm just gonna tell you, this just did not work out. A, low sample size, so not enough power to do squat. And then you can just sort of see, it's not particularly promising here, of what we did find in terms of knowledge, intention, and efficacy. And so how we actually did collect some data, and I think it was 92 adolescents overall in the study, was through Zoom, and showing the videos through Zoom. Cameras weren't allowed to be on, so we don't even know if anybody paid attention. So there's a lot of reasons this could have failed, and it's perhaps ripe to actually try to do in person again at some point to actually see if these videos could make a difference. But after a while, we were working with a group in New York to try to recruit, and we were not having success. And at some point, you kind of pull the plug on some projects when they're not really going anywhere. So anyway, we got great videos. They're both, whether it's the diffusion of innovation video or the control video, they're both, solid videos that people can use for educational purposes. So if nothing else, we have a deliverable, which was a big goal of the BSERP, is to have outreach materials and education materials that teachers and docs can use. So some impact there too. So Sam writes, she took time regarding the drive behind the grant, the power of the breast cancer advocates, and the importance of the work we were performing. She made clear we worked for the advocates, they were our boss. She was always driven to make a difference. It was hard not to fall in love with health communication working for her. And to this day, she gives the same advice that Sandy gave her when they attend a conference. By all means, go to presentations, tell me what you learned, but don't forget to go shopping. So now I just want to talk about it spawned a lot of stuff, a lot of output, we'll just say, a lot of deliverables and what we might say in the land of funding. Lots of qualitative research and quantitative research that led to publications and book chapters too. Sandy and I wrote a book for an organizational communication book about the model and using sort of Senge's framework to talk about how breast cancer, the BSERP was a great example of that. We wrote a case study where we had characters and how to talk about it with cancer with your research team in a health communication textbook. We did encyclopedia entries for lots of different places, an environmental health literacy chapter,
did dissertations. Dan Totsky, maybe the most recent one, or Brandon Thomas had a little bit, but it wasn't directly, did his with breast density notifications, trying to get at sort of the policy piece of everybody's making these policies around mandating this at the state level, that women should get notifications of breast density, and is this really a useful policy? And his research found that it's actually not such a useful thing to be doing. Did these training videos, we have these credits that are living on, we have flyers and coloring books. Brandon Thomas sent me the coloring books. We did not make these coloring books, one of our partners did, but we did go to a lot of outreach events and hand things out and try to educate the world about breast cancer risk reduction. So this is just a couple pages I took from them with the message. Yummy, we eat local, certified organic fruits and vegetables, which is good for lots of reasons, not just breast cancer, right? Don't use artificial fresheners. Open the windows to bring in the fresh air. So yes, those little plugins that people put in their houses, no, okay? Plastic in the microwave, no. Those little lean cuisine, I remember Doshik Young. Doshik, I was in there doing my lean cuisine upstairs. He's like, Cammie. I was like, what, Doshik? He says, why don't you listen? And because we're working on the breast cancer project, I'm like, what are you talking about? And he's like, it's plastic. I was like, huh, sure is, isn't it? Yeah, not making the connection there, Silk, right? So, we trained a lot of students, and I'm sure I probably forgot some folks, but these were a lot of health and risk communication master's students, as well as a ton of masters in comm students, as well as PhD students in comm too. Here's a bunch of their names. Evan, he's such a thoughtful guy in some ways, because he wrote sort of a three-pronged answer, which I thought was a great framing. And first it was how BSERP has helped him professionally, and then working with the group, and then personally. So he remembers the data collection with the Army of Women, with surveys going out to thousands, and then getting the data back and realizing that we had not measured whether people have children. Kind of a fundamental question for us. So even though this was unfortunate for the team at the time, it's a memory that sticks with him when he's training his own students. And so the best thing that we can do is learn from our mistakes. So it's funny because I use that same, every time we're getting ready to launch something, I'm like, we can't be like that time where we forgot to measure children. Chuck was still around at that time too, and we was just sort of this kind of moment, you know? And then the experiences he talked about working with the BSERP continue to pay dividends today. It's provided confidence and skills about independent research, building connections still to this day with scientists to improve health and scientific literacy among different populations. And what was really interesting to me, and he was the one who really talked about the personal impact in terms of engaging in different behaviors in his own life, in his lifestyle. He's married to a woman who was like a news anchor on television a lot. And I think that with that job comes wearing makeup and having the face on and that kind of thing. So I think this was particularly pertinent for him to, so he says because of his improved knowledge on the topics, he doesn't store or cook anything in plastic. Everything gets heated in glass-spaced bowls or plates, and continue to work with my wife to remove and reduce many of the makeups she uses that I know contain these problematic compounds. The hope is that the environment we're raising our 6-year-old in will be much cleaner than the one we grew up in. So that's a personal impact, right? That's a different level. For me personally, today is a big day. October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. I'm here to celebrate Chuck, here to celebrate Sandy. Today is the 7th year of my mother's death from breast cancer. So there's that. I'll be beyond this moment, don't worry. So it's personal. So Dan, who is at WVU, who's having lots of very public issues. He's saying things like, the best thing that always comes to mind is the level of boom, you fill in the curse word he put. Sandy still gives me about my prelim. Trying to both figure out how we could study, how women seek information on breast cancer and the environment while also doing some theory work. And I had about 5 or 6 theories I tried to talk about, and Sandy just said, damn, this is like Mr. Toad's wild ride of theories and theories.
when I think overall, I think about the BSERP as this real 20-year ride, right? Where we addressed sort of this grand challenge type of problem in partnership with other disciplines. We demonstrated how comm science is important and valuable, and our expertise can really contribute to public health initiatives. We supported students, and we really supported advocates. We were particularly helpful in helping them to get funding from the scientists, to be clear. We were instrumental in ensuring they had resources to do their outreach work, because who gets forgotten in these larger grants? The advocates. Well, it's just a nonprofit. What do they need resources for to do their work? So we helped change some of that orientation. And also the lasting impact with not only our publications, but with the CME, the videos, and also for the careers that it launched, including my own. So in Chuck's words, no, Carolyn Locklear, I want to do Carolyn first, yeah. So Carolyn didn't work on the BSERP, but she's also somebody who shows the trajectory that Sandy, and the impact Sandy can have on someone. She's at, I think, the University of Kentucky now, but she started working with her when she was 17 years old. And she even started her first year at MSU. She felt special and powerful. Sandy was this important professor, and I think we all think that. And she's taken the time to help with her, a one-on-one. And that is so Sandy, very one-on-one. Come see me, we're gonna sit down and we're gonna solve this. She somehow managed to teach me about content analysis, the coding process. I know I knew what it really was at the time, and from that point on, I was hooked. Again, the enthusiasm that Sandy generates in people to get engaged with research. And throughout my undergraduate career, she was a consistent mentor and advisor. She taught me how to write, paid my way to go to conferences, helped me decide what to do for graduate school. She is 100% the reason why I ended up in academia. I'm very grateful for her guidance and support. So there's a great MSU Today article. You seem to be jumping ahead here. Chuck's, here we go, fine. MSU Today article back probably a few years after the breast cancer grant was initially awarded, that kind of just summed up Chuck in his approach to his research. And it just kind of captured not just BSERP, but also this idea that we can play a role in prevention, and campaigns can really help. So mass comm techniques can educate the public in improving nutritional habits, avoiding factors that lead to cancer and heart disease, and driving in a safer fashion. See how he packed in all of his different things that he was doing? And they'll all lengthen people's life, they'll help them avoid injury, improve their satisfaction with their day-to-day living. He's taken a close look at how persuasive appeals can motivate people to maintain healthier lifestyles. We really have that focus early on in the BSERP, but really thinking about diet and exercise as a key piece. And we want to help to translate what's being learned by experts in the manner that the public can adopt new behavior patterns. Makes sense. I said that. And I wanted to share this picture. I found this picture, well, John found this picture. Back in 2011, we were in ICA in Boston, and John and I were heading over to JFK, and we're like, hey, Chuck, you want to go? John's like, John always likes Chuck because of all of the political communication stuff. He loves always talking to him about that when we got to see him. And so we took a cab, we all like shoved into a cab, rode on over, and did this, and then we got lots of, a few pictures anyway, of this. And I think of Chuck as a person who was a mentor, fun, and just a wonderful, wonderful person and collaborator. And Sandy too. I feel the same way about you. So, thanks. Oh, sure.
Yeah. So I love this picture so much because see the smile on Chuck's face? He had that smile every waking moment. He always looked like that. He was always happy, he always had a smile, and he always kind of shuffled around with that smile on his face. So that's
When he had
really,
his pipe in his mouth.
yeah, I know. Don't you love how he was going to make people live healthier lives while he smoked the pipe?
Other people.
Thank you. That was fun.
All right. Ron, do you have a question?
No.
I want you to know that I started this talk, Sandy, with the title of BSERP Research Roast. I thought that I was just gonna like not roast you, just say all more and more wonderful things and more, even more than what I had. So I dotted that.
I told you you didn't want it. Don't blame me.
No.
Yeah, that would be a roast to me, the more you did it,
Yes.
you know, that's.
Yeah.
But I love all the sentiments, they were really sweet, thank
Good.
you.
Can you just go back to the slide with all the students that you worked with? Lindsay Newberger wants to make sure she's on it.
She is. Is she texting you?
Yes. Thank you, thank you.
Just to be clear.
In the center,
She
she's
also
right in the center
was
of
told
the
by
whole-
Sandy to go get a winter coat as well. Like,